What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Kelly. This is Phillies Stoplight, and I had an entirely different show planned, but seconds after I left the ballpark, Ken Rosenthal was the first to report that the Phillies are bringing David Robertson back for the third time, so we're going to pivot and discuss that. The initial tweet, which this part wasn't from Rosenthal, and I don't even remember who it was from. The initial tweet of the terms of David Robertson's deal said that it was $16 million prorated, which to me is a dishonest way of putting it because he didn't get $16 million. If he had gotten $16 million, he would have signed a long time ago. And it just gives off the impression that David Robertson told whoever that was, you can have the scoop, but you have to kind of mislead people. It's the same way NFL insiders mislead people with the guarantees. This to me, it's not incorrect that it's $16 million prorated, but what it comes down to is like $5 or $6 million total because it's prorated and it's an 162 game season and you're signing in mid-July. So it's nothing close to $16 million. Phrasing it as $16 million prorated is just kind of shameless in my mind. But regardless of that, the signing I like. I think it's a good signing. I get that he's 40 years old. He hasn't pitched this year. By all accounts, he hasn't pitched this year because he's decided not to pitch this year until now. He was, according to Bob Nightingale of USA Today, looking for $15 million in the offseason, which makes the prorated $16 million number even interesting. It's kind of a way for Robertson, who represents himself, to kind of present it as he got he won. But I think there's other things, like his son was always with him in 2022 when he came back to the Phillies for the second time. And I think there's just other considerations at this point in his life that maybe he felt like, I'm only going to pitch on my terms. His terms were not any that people were willing to match in March, April, or May. But here we are in July, and the terms obviously have gone down because there's only so much time left in the season. And he signs with the Phillies, 3.00 ERA in 68 games for the Rangers last year. The FIP was even lower than that. This will be his third stint with the Phillies, and I need to do some research on if anyone else has had 3 stints with the Phillies. I would imagine somebody has, but no one is coming to my mind right now. But the first stint obviously did not go well, but he got injured. He ended up needing Tommy John surgery. It was always a little weird to me that people held that against him as if there was anything he could do about it. But then he revived his career after that, beginning in Tampa Bay, ends up back with the Phillies in 2022. He kind of ran out of gas in the postseason that year, but in the regular season, he was a big piece, especially during the period that Sir Anthony Dominguez had been down. So the second stint overall, I think, went pretty well. And he is a pro. He's a guy to me that you can plug in. I'm sure going to require a rehab tune-up here where he makes a few appearances in the minor leagues, but it's not the same as a starting pitcher where you need this gigantic build-up. And seemingly he held a bullpen session for teams over the weekend and looked really good. So it would appear that he's been throwing and isn't particularly far off from getting to throw. Obviously, we'll know more tomorrow when we talk to Rob Thompson and potentially Dave Dombrowski about the signing. So David Robertson back for the third time with the Phillies. I think if he's back as like a pickup as opposed to the pickup, this is a good deal because the reality is the Phillies need multiple bullpen arms. Maybe someone will come from the rotation at a later point in the season, but you're going to need to make a bigger pickup. With that said, it's going to cost you a ton if you want to go get Clase, Griffin Jacks, Duran, Helsley, whoever, Bautista, even David Bednar would probably cost a lot. On top of that, I don't know how much wiggle room you're going to have to make multiple reliever trades. So let's say you make one reliever trade, you add David Robertson, you potentially get somebody from the rotation later on this season. You will have Jose Alvarado again on August 19th, although he's ineligible for the postseason. In any event, I think you've improved your bullpen, and this is a good start. If this is just the start and not the finished product, I think this is the right move for the Phillies. So David Robertson back for a third time. Now, what I initially had planned to talk about was a different contractual status. That was that of Kyle Schwarber's, because before Friday's game, John Middleton spoke, and he was mostly asked about the All-Star game, but someone did ask him after winning the home run derby, winning the home run derby that decided the All-Star game, the home run swing-off, did that put any extra pressure on the Phillies to try and get this done? And Middleton said, quote, "No, we need no motivation whatsoever when it comes to Kyle Schwarber. He's great. We thought he was great when we signed him 2 years ago. We've thought he was great consistently during the years. There's nothing Kyle does that surprises us, no matter how great he is. We expect that from Kyle, and he's been a great person in the clubhouse. We love him. We want to keep him. We don't need any motivation whatsoever." So John Middleton says that Friday. Friday night, Kyle Schwarber comes up. His first swing of the second half is a home run. Saturday, he hits a grand slam. And then Bryce Harper, after the game, says, quote, and this is a shortened version of his quote, the full story is on Pattison. The video you can find on my Instagram, Tim Kelly Sports. But he says, "I can't see him in any other uniform, and I think he deserves to be there." And he had said something similar on Scott Lauber's Philadelphia Inquirer podcast, Phillies Extra, earlier this season, not that long ago, and we wrote about it. So it's not that Harper hadn't said this, but it still is a bigger deal when Harper says it in front of the cameras, which means it's going on the post-game show, however many outlets on Pattison, Phillies Nation, whoever is standing there recording video is posting that. So you're just getting to a larger audience, and having Bryce Harper come out and say this is huge. Now, Kyle Schwarber essentially said, I did ask him what it meant to him that he's had basically unanimity from the fan base, from media that covers the team, from players in the clubhouse that think he should be re-signed. And he talked about it meaning a lot, and he's really felt welcomed here in Philadelphia over this time. He's kind of been able to establish some roots here. So he said the right thing in that answer. Someone then followed up with him, I think it was Paul Casella of MLB.com, followed up with him and said, "Is there any chance, obviously the Phillies want you, you seem to want to be here, is there any chance something gets done before the end of the season?" And Schwarber said, quote, "To be honest with you, it's probably something you just wait till the end of the season." He said he wants to be all in. He doesn't want to be focused on or distracted by numbers getting exchanged, and maybe an offer comes in that he doesn't like, or maybe one comes in that he does like, but it's not quite where he's ready to sign for. That would, especially at this juncture of the season, I think potentially be a distraction. So ultimately, I do believe he's going to test free agency this offseason. The Phillies will give him the qualifying offer, which would mean, because they're luxury taxpayers, I believe if he left in free agency, they'd get like a 4th-round compensatory pick next year, which isn't much given how good Kyle Schwarber is, but it's not nothing either. My guess would be that the Phillies do ultimately re-sign him, because I look around, and over the last 25 years, what free agents have the Phillies wanted to re-sign and not re-signed? Maybe Jason Worth, you can make the case that they wanted to keep him. The Nationals came through with the Godfather offer and he left. But the Phillies could have met that offer if they really wanted to, because a couple weeks later they gave 125 or 120 whatever it was $1 million to Cliff Lee on a 5-year deal. So even in the one move you can point to in recent years where the Phillies wanted to re-sign someone, it didn't, and not that that's really that recent at this point, but that one kind of comes with some caveats. Maybe Billy Wagner, you can kind of say something similar for. It seemed like he wanted to be a Met at that time. The Mets gave him a better offer than the Phillies did. So in general, though, in recent years, even going back to that 08 core, they kept Howard, they kept Utley, they kept Rollins, maybe too long in some of those cases. In this era, you re-sign JT Realmuto, you re-sign Zach Wheeler. History tells us that the Phillies are going to re-sign their own guys if they choose to do. And clearly, John Middleton, Dave Dombrowski, Bryce Harper, everyone seems to want to re-sign Kyle Schwarber. What I will say is there are going to be interested teams in him in free agency, and it's going to up the price for him. And the one team that I would say I look at and think, oh, that could be real competition to the Phillies. Not that, if the Yankees got involved or the Mets or whoever gets involved, obviously they're going to have a case too, because I think in the end he's probably going to take the biggest deal. The Cubs are the intriguing team, though. Obviously, he began his career there, won the 2016 World Series. You could make the argument that there's unfinished business with him. At the same time, they non-tendered him, which clearly goes down now as one of the biggest mistakes in this era of baseball. They non-tendered him, let him go. He kind of found himself with Kevin Long in the Nationals, spent that year between the Nationals and Red Sox. And for as much as people nationally will probably always associate him most with the Cubs because he helped them to end the 108-year World Series drought, he's going to have hit a ton more home runs with the Phillies, even if he just plays this 4-year stretch, probably than what he'll go down hitting with the Cubs. So I would say the Phillies have the advantage there, but it is going to come down to money, and as it does in most of these cases, I would think. I would imagine if there's a tie to break, the Phillies will probably win that tie, but you don't really want to get into that situation because if you lose Kyle Schwarber, you're going to be significantly worse next year. There's no way around that. The final thing I want to get to, and this may be super niche, but it's interesting to me, Friday afternoon at City Hall, the Phillies held kind of the beginning of the year of hosting the All-Star event, and I was not there, but Grace Del Pizzo from Pattison was there. Seems like it was a really cool event. Came back to the stadium because one of the things that was unveiled at this event was the logo for the 2027 All-Star Game, which was Liberty Bell inspired. Maybe not necessarily like out of the box, but I like it. I think, especially considering it's the 250th anniversary of America, there's no way a Liberty Bell wasn't going to be in there. I think it's a cool logo. But the logo is now in center field at Citizens Bank Park, and it's there at the expense of the analog clock that had been in center field since Citizens Bank Park opened. Now, do you need a clock in 2025? Probably not. Like 99% of the people in the stadium have it. I will say, I didn't realize until this weekend how frequently I looked out there to check the time. Even though I'm looking at a laptop almost all the time, I'm in the press box, I have my phone with me, I still like to look out at that clock, and it's just something I've become so used to doing at that park because when it opened, obviously, not everybody had phones. They certainly didn't have smartphones. I wasn't sitting in the press box because I was a kid. So you're just so used to looking out there in center field. I did ask a Phillies team spokesperson, is the plan for the clock to go back up after the All-Star game next year? And they said, quote, no decision has been made at this stage about the clock returning. If you made me guess, I would guess that an ad of some sort will end up there. Maybe they'll find another spot for the clock, although I would imagine it won't be as front-facing. And it's sad because the clock paid homage to Connie Mack. There was a similar stadium or a similar clock at Connie Mack Stadium, and that's a cool piece of history. And over the last few years, they've done what amount to modernizing upgrades of the stadium, but I think in some ways it's lost character, like taking out the out-of-town scoreboard for what is basically an ad board. They do put some advanced numbers on there, which is cool, but it's mostly used for ads now. And the reason for citing that was, well, you can just look up at your phone and find the scores there. I think that kind of misses the point. Like Citizens Bank Park, the charm of it was that it was this throwback park that it was modern, but it had this old school feel. One of the coolest days ever at Citizens Bank Park was in 2007, final day of the season, looking up and really down the stretch of any season, seeing the scores change on there. I really miss that out-of-town scoreboard. That's gone. There's so many digital boards in the stadium now that it does feel a little bit like sensory overload. It's almost hard to focus on the game at times. So it is what it is. I mean, they're going to do what they're going to do, and ultimately money wins out in these situations, and maybe the money from whatever ad goes there helps contribute to re-signing Kyle Schwarber or paying what you're paying David Robertson this year. So I guess you can't complain about it too much. But I will say I miss some of the old school features of the park, and I'm a little afraid of over-modernizing it. So that's going to do it for this episode of Phillies Stoplight on Pattison. It's been a long week. Phillies Stoplight on Pattison. Check out all our content on the site, and I will talk to you guys next time.